Hello, Algebra 1. Today we are going to do a continuation of graphing, and we are also going to talk about parallel and perpendicular lines. First, a little recap from our last lesson. We're going to identify the slope and the y-intercept, and then write the equation of the line. So our slope, we are going up and right, up 1, right 2. That means our slope is a 1/2. That's what m stands for. B is our starting point, or our y-intercept. That's our 0, -1. And again, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. So we'll just go ahead and we'll plug these values in. 1/2 goes in for m. Make sure you still have your x. And then plus b, our b value is -1. So there you go. That's your equation. Remember, sometimes our equations will not be in slope-intercept form. This is also called function form. And this means that we are going to need to solve for y. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to take this equation and we are going to move it to slope-intercept form. When we solve for y, we'll start by moving our x over and we will subtract it on both sides. Make sure you break down a -10y. And instead of saying 30 minus 2x, we are now transitioning to say -2x plus 30. So we're just switching the order on those. And then we're going to go ahead and divide by -10. All right, so that'll give us a y equals -2 divided by -10 gives us a 1/5. Don't lose your x. And then 30 divided by -10 is a -3. Our slope is that number with x, so that's a 1/5. Our y-intercept b, make sure you put your 0 comma before putting your -3. All right, so let's talk about how we would actually graph this now. So how to graph in slope-intercept form. Step 1 is always to solve for y. Sometimes that step is already done for you. Step 2, we should do what we just did here. Identify m and b. Once you do that, we're actually ready to start graphing. So step 3, we're going to plot b. Make sure you're on the y-axis. Okay, 0 comma, that's always going to be on the y-axis. And then for m, we are going to use m to go up and right or down and right. The up would be if we have a positive slope and the down would be if we have a negative slope. All right, and finally you should be drawing a line with arrows. All right, so let's do 2 of those. Put the equation into slope-intercept form or function form if necessary, then graph. Well, slope-intercept form is when y is solved for. Neither of these are solved for y, so we will have to solve for y for both. All right, so first step, to get y by itself in this problem, we do need to divide by 3. All right, and then I'll simplify. Y equals -2/3 x. That will not simplify. -3 divided by +3 is a -1. All right, so I've solved for y. Now I'm ready for my next step, which is to identify m and b. My m value is what's with x, so that's a -2/3. My b value is my number that's being added or subtracted. Make sure you put your 0 comma. All right, and now I'm on to my graphing portion. Plot your b value on your y-axis, so down here at -1. Okay, I'm on to step 4. Use m to go up and right or down and right. Because my slope is negative, I will be going down and right. Down 2, right 3. Because that's a -2/3. And then once I run out of room, I'm going to go back up to left 3. And draw your line. and because it's a negative slope, it should be going downhill, which it is. All right, let's try one more of these before we start talking about parallel and perpendicular lines. We do need to solve for y again. This time we will have to subtract our 16x over first. Okay, bring down your negative 8y. And again, our order here, we want to start putting our x first. So you'll put your negative 16x, then your minus 32. And then finally, we'll divide by negative 8. And really watch your signs here. Negative 16 divided by negative 8 is a positive 2x. Negative 32 divided by negative 8 is a positive 4. Our slope is the 2. Our y-intercept is the 0, 4. And now we'll go ahead and we'll graph this. Plot your y-intercept, 0, 4, on your y-axis. That slope of 2 is a 2 over 1. We're going up 2 and right 1. Since it's positive, we're going up. Once we run out of room, we'll go down 2, left 1. And then you can draw your line. All right, on to the new stuff, parallel and perpendicular lines. Parallel lines we know are lines that never touch. Perpendicular lines are lines that form a right angle where they intersect. Right angles are like your x and y axis. They make a cross like this. Now, what's true about parallel lines, besides the fact that they never touch, is that they have the same slope. And what's true about perpendicular lines is that they have something called opposite reciprocal slopes. Now, we know what both of those words mean separately, opposite and reciprocal, but what do they mean when we put them together? Well, it's both of the things at once. So for example, opposite means a positive and a negative. So the opposite of a positive is a negative, the opposite of a negative is a positive. Reciprocal means that we flip the number over. So when we do an opposite reciprocal, we're going to take your 4/5, which is a positive, we're going to change it to a negative, and we're going to flip it over. This is the opposite reciprocal. All right, we'll try it again. Negative 1/3, we're going to change it to a positive. We're going to flip it over to be a 3 over 1, or you could just call this 3. Now, when there isn't a fraction, you can just put a 1 at the bottom of it, change the sign, so positive becomes a negative, and then when you flip it, it's still a 1 over 1, so we can just call this negative 1. 8 over 1, change the sign, so it's a negative now, and when you flip the fraction, it becomes negative 1/8. All right, and then finally, negative 6 over 7, change the sign to a positive, flip the fraction over. So 7/6. All right, so you're just changing the sign and you're flipping the number over. That's what an opposite reciprocal is. All right, so let's give it a try. We are going to identify the slope of the equation and then say what the parallel slope is as well as the perpendicular slope. So our slope is what's with x, so our slope is just a 3. Parallel slopes are the same, so this is also just a 3. Perpendicular slopes are your opposite reciprocal. So we're going to change the 3 to a negative, but we're also going to flip it over. So it would be a 1/3 now, negative 1/3. Okay, we'll try it again. Slope is 1/2 because that's what's with x. Parallel slope is the same thing. Perpendicular slope, our positive changes to a negative. Flip that 1/2 over to make it a negative 2. All right, we'll keep going. Slope is what's with x, that's a negative 3/4. Make sure you get the negative as well. Parallel slopes are the same. Perpendicular slope, change it to a positive, flip it over. 4/3. And finally, this last one tricks people all the time. People want to say their slope is -5, but hold up. Y is not solved for yet, so we cannot determine the slope yet. We will have to divide by 2 first to get the y by itself. 20 divided by 2 is 10. So now we can identify the slope. The slope isn't -5, it's really -5/2. Again, parallel slope is exactly the same. And perpendicular slope, change the sign to a positive, flip the fraction over. All right, so now let's take a look at these equations and decide if the lines are parallel, perpendicular, or maybe not either of those based on their slopes. For our first equation, y is already solved for, so we can see our first slope here is -1/2. I'm just going to put that on this line. This second equation, we can't yet determine what the slope is because we haven't solved for y. So we will have to do that first by subtracting our 2x over. Again, you want to put a -2x plus 12. And then we will have to divide by our 4 on both sides. -2/4, mass fracs to -1/2. Don't lose your x. Plus 3. Now we can identify our slope. It's what's with x once you have y by itself, so it's also a -1/2. And then we're going to look at these two numbers. Notice how they're the same. That means the lines are parallel. All right, now let's look at number 6. Both of these equations already have y solved for, so we can identify our slope right away. The first slope is 2/3 because that's what's with x. And the second slope is a -3/2 because again, that's what is with x. And we're going to take a look. The numbers are flipped, 2/3, 3/2. One is a positive and one is a negative. That means they are called opposite reciprocals, which means these are perpendicular lines. Now let's try to do the same thing from these tables. So we are going to find the slope of each table, and that will tell us whether these lines are parallel, perpendicular, or maybe they don't have any of the same relationships. All right, so I'm going to start by doing my jumps. 4 to 14 is 10. 0 to 8 is 8. So my first slope is a 10/8, which I'll math frac to 5/4. Next one, up 5. -10 to -6 is up 4. This slope is 5/4. Just like we saw before, these are the same numbers, same slopes. So since they have the same slope, this means the lines are parallel. Let's try another one. Do your jumps. 4 to 6, up 2. 8 to 12, up 4. This is 2/4. Make sure you simplify that to a 1/2. All right, now we do the other one. -4 to -6, these numbers are getting smaller. This is going down. 0 to 4, up 4. -2/4 is still a 1/2, but it's a negative. Now, these are opposites, but they're not reciprocals. Notice how we didn't flip the number over, we just changed the sign. That means this is a neither. It's not parallel or perpendicular. The final thing we're going to do is go back to graphs. It says 6 and 8, but this is incorrect. It's actually numbers, I think 2 and 3, and we're going to graph a parallel line through the point 2, 4. So let's go back to our graphs. Yep, here they are. 2, 4 is our point. So how do we graph a parallel line? Well, we just talked about parallel lines have the same slope. So all we have to do is plot this point 2, 4, and then we'll use the same slope of that line. Our slope was -2/3, so I'll go ahead and do that same slope. Down 2, right 3. down 2, right 3. And you can see, even as we reverse it, that these lines aren't going to hit. And there are your parallel lines. Now let's try it for the next one. 2, 4 again. That's right here. This time our slope is 2 over 1, or 2. So we do need to do that slope now. Up 2, right 1, up 2, right 1. And you can see they do look parallel. All right, we have our parallel lines. There you go, and that's the end of our lesson. Have a great day.